Hey you awesome people, welcome to my channel. This is Sapta, and if you're here for the first time, this is the place where I help designers build and scale their career with tips, suggestions and tutorials. So if you're into it, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Today in this episode, I'm going to teach you how to make this. Now this is a new concept. I'm going to introduce one new concept here, which is a bit of 3D inside After Effects. But if you're first time in After Effects, I highly recommend you check out the other episodes that I have built as a part of this masterclass. I will leave the links in this info button right there in the corner. So what are we waiting for? Let's get started. Let's just seek through the animation once. So it's a pile of cards at the top, and when you pull, it fans out in the 3D space, revealing the names of all the cards. And then when one card is selected by tapping on it, it goes and sits there at the top, showing the details, the transactions which were made using that card. That's it. If I just go ahead and play, this is what we are going to make now. Here's a sample UI that I made on Figma. These are the pile of the cards. And these are some graphs which shows different limits. I don't even know what these are supposed to mean. I honestly made them just to fill up the space. This is the details page where the selected card is at the top with the transactions. Yep, that's pretty much the UI. And these are the assets. So I've split them up into different cards. This entire spends thing can be one. The back buttons, a black version and a white version. And the backgrounds, of course, I could have created the backgrounds inside After Effects as well, but instead of solid colors, I've used some gradients. Of course, you can apply gradients inside After Effects as well, but I thought it would just be simpler if I just export them as images. And this is nothing but the details, the transaction. So we need to export all these as images, as transparent PNG images and store at some location. Now we are in After Effects, and as the first step, we will import all the assets, the images that we have just exported. So to do that, while I'm in the project panel, I will double click here, navigate to where my assets are. In my case, this is this folder image assets. I will select all of them and click open. This will bring all these images inside After Effects, and I will create a folder for all of them inside project itself, just for better organization. To do that, I can select all these images and click and drag and click over this folder icon, and I will give it a name, image assets. So all my images are inside this folder. Next, I'll go ahead and create a composition. To do that, I'll click on new composition here. I would select a size of width 1080 and a height 2400. Again, it's one of those long high-end Android phones. Frame rate would be 60 and resolution, it doesn't quite matter because this doesn't affect the resolution of the final output, but it's just the resolution of the preview that you see while you're animating. So I will keep it a quarter because it's a little easier on my system. At duration, I'll keep it 10 seconds, although it'll be much lesser than that, but just for the sake of comfort, I'll keep it 10. I'll go ahead and click OK. Oh, before that, I'll actually give it a name as well. Let's call it main mobile. I'll go ahead and click OK, and that's my composition. And it's open right here. This is my workspace. So as the first step, I'll go and assemble the UI first. So the first thing is the home background, which is nothing but that light gradient from a gray to a white color that I had given. Now this will just remain, and I'm not going to touch it ever, neither going to animate anything over it. So I can go ahead and conveniently lock it so that it doesn't get moved while I'm animating. The next things are the cards. Let's quickly bring the cards, the black, blue, orange and silver. I will click and drag them and place them above the background because I want them over the background. And if I zoom in, yep, you'll see all the cards are stacked one above another. I will place them somewhere here. This looks good enough. And now I will do one thing. While they are selected, you see the anchor points of all of them are at the center of the card. But for this animation, I want them at the bottom because I want them to rotate about bottom. So to do that, I can grab this tool, which is pan behind tool. The shortcut of that is Y. So I can click that. So this is something that you'll have to do one at a time. So you can select any one of the card, click and drag the anchor point and bring it to the bottom. If you're doing it with this, or if you have this plugin called Motion 2, there's a tool for doing that as well. So you select all the cards together. Yes, you can do it for all of them together if you're using the plugin. Click here once and you will see this array of points. This is nothing but where you want to move the anchor point to. So in my case, I want them at the bottom, so I will click this and all the anchor points of all the selected cards will come to the bottom edge. Similarly, I can move them to the left, right, center, or whichever. So right now I want it at the bottom edge, so I'll click here and that's it. Now what happens is, every action, every animation that we are going to do to these cards are going to happen about this point. To show you, if I were to rotate, let's take the black card for example, I will hit R on my keyboard to reveal rotation, and when I change the value of it, you see it's rotating about the bottom point. But that's not how we want to rotate our cards in this animation. So we'll get there, but before that, let's set the initial position. In the initial position, if you remember, all the cards were stacked over one another. We're going to do exactly the same. The black card is the topmost card that I have here, followed by, actually I want orange, so I'll just change the order. Orange, followed by blue and silver. Yep, this is my preference. So the black, since it is the topmost card, will remain the way it is. The orange card, I will scale it to 96%. To that, I will hit S on the keyboard and I will change this value to 96. Similarly for the blue, I will set the scale to 92, and for the silver, I will set the scale to 88. That's because I want them smaller, the ones which are stacked behind. And after I have done that, I will also have to move them a little up so that the edges show at the top end. To do that, I will zoom in here and I'll not touch the black one because I'm fine with the position of the black. I will just move the remaining, the orange, yeah, I think that much is good enough. The blue, and then I will deselect the blue and bring the silver. Yeah, this is just based on your estimation. You know, how would you want the initial stack of cards to look like? I think this pretty much looks good. And I will bring the whole thing a little down because, you know, once we put the back button and the text out there, it's going to take up some space. So I think this will be a good initial position for all the cards to get started with. Let's also bring the back buttons here. So I would need the back black because this is on a white background. I will place it somewhere here. I'll place it somewhere here. And I'll also need a text label which says all cards. I could have, of course, exported an image directly from Figma, but I thought I could write the text on After Effects itself. So for that, I will select the text tool, which is here, horizontal type, and I will click anywhere and I will type all cards. And for the style, I have used a font size of 54 Montserrat bold. You can use whatever you want, and I will place it roughly along the same line where the back button is. I can make use of the align tools of After Effects so that they are exactly centered with respect to the artboard. So when I click on this, yep, this is perfectly centered. I'll bring it a little down. Yep, this looks good. Now the only other thing which is remaining for the initial stage is the contents, the graphs that we had made. Remember the analytics pins. For that, I have saved that image as home content. I will drag and place it anywhere here. It automatically gets center aligned, and I will drag and bring it somewhere here. I think this is pretty much, this looks good enough, right? Okay, now let us go ahead and animate the cards first. So which means I don't have to bother about this home content and all right away. So I'll put them right here at the down, and I will lock all this layer. So the background is already locked. Now I have locked the home content as well so that, you know, I don't accidentally end up moving them. Actually, I don't even need to do anything to the all cards text right now. So I will go ahead and lock that as well. And so is the back button. So I've locked everything except this 4 cards because I'm going to work with them. Now here is the new thing that we are going to do today. This is called 3D layers. So it's one small thing that you turn on for a particular layer, and that layer starts exhibiting some 3D properties. Well, not 3D like the way you get to see in Cinema 4D and other 3D tools, but pretty much rotation and position and a few other things, few other 3D properties that you can access. And that's exactly what we are going to do now. So I will select all of these cards. I can turn on for them at the same time. And if I zoom in here, you will see this thing is called a 3D layer, allows this layer to be manipulated in 3 dimensions. And these are checkboxes corresponding to 3D for these selected layers. I'll go and turn on the checkbox. The moment I do, you will see, if I just unzoom it, you will see this 3D box appears here. So it indicates that these layers are now 3D. And don't bother what has happened at the top, because due to 3D properties, it renders in a different way. Now what 3D does, it brings a few new things into considerations. To show you, for position, if I click P on the keyboard, now you don't see X and Y alone, you see an X, Y and Z values as well, because now you're talking in the 3 dimension. Now we can tweak some things here so that we don't land into any kind of trouble later. And that is, we want the black card to be the very first card, followed by the orange, followed by the blue, followed by the silver. Although your layers are aligned in this particular order, but now since they are 3D layers, you still get to see the silver one, although it is the very last card. That's because 3D kind of screws up a few things. To fix that, what we need to do is we just need to tweak the Z position of each one of these cards in a certain way, so that we always assign black the topmost position, then the orange, then the blue and silver. The way it works is 0 is the center. Anything which is negative is towards you. Anything which is positive is away from you. Clear? So let's start with silver, because that's the last card. I'll keep it 0. For the blue, I'll make it -2. For the orange, I'll make it -4. For the black, I'll make it -6. You see what we just did? We just tweaked the Z position of these cards a bit by 2 units each, and now we could successfully establish the order in which we want our cards to be in. Now this is the front view, what you're saying. If you want to see how it actually looks from the side, you can always go here and go to this go to active, click on this active camera and click on left or right, any one of them. I'll click left and show you. So these are what your cards are. If I zoom in, you'll actually see there is a gap of 2 units between each of these cards, and that's exactly what we have done here in the Z-axis, right? Now, you don't have to worry about this view and all, don't worry. We just need to see our active camera and we are back to our front view. Now, since these layers are 3D, we can rotate them about different axes as well. Previously, you could only rotate it about one single axis because it was 2D, and now there are new things which gets unlocked. To see that, let us press R on the keyboard, and it reveals, you see, not just one value, but 4 different things. X, Y and Z rotations which are separated out, along with something called orientation. The orientation is nothing but, if you just change these values, it might seem pretty much like rotation itself. You see how it is reacting to? So we'll ignore orientation completely for now. And what we care about in this is X rotation. Just see. You see it is rotating about the X axis, and that's exactly how we want our cards to rotate. Okay, I'll do a Command Z so that everything is back to 0. So I will select all these cards, and this handle, it's at 0 seconds right now, and as usual, it's not a good idea to start your animation at 0 seconds, so I will move 40 frames ahead. Command Shift on my keyboard and I press the right button 4 times. And now when I'm at 40 frames, I'll go ahead and click on the stopwatch to activate X rotation for all of them. And that also adds a keyframe for the X rotation values of all these cards. Now we move another 40 frames ahead by pressing Command Shift and the right keyboard 4 times. And now we will change the value of this X rotation to plus 50 degrees. Yep. Now these cards have rotated, but you see that they didn't really rotate like the way you expected them to be. It's like, too much on your face. It's also getting cut. The reason is when you convert any layer into a 3D layer, After Effects always sees it through a camera. Now you do not see any camera out here because, you don't need to. But there is always a default camera using which you are seeing it, and that is nothing but this active camera that you see here, something that you have been conveniently ignoring all this while, and which is totally fine. Now the problem with the default camera is it is a very wide angle camera, and that's why you see all these cards distorted. Think of it like, the selfie camera of your mobile phone. When you hold it very close to your face looks kind of distorted and large. The exact same thing is happening here. Now there's a very simple solution to that, and which is to replace the camera with something which is not so wide. And to do that, we will click on Layer, New, and Camera. Now when you do that, you will see one very scary looking window opens up with all the camera settings. Now in this, do not bother changing anything. Just go to Presets and select 135mm as the preset. Go ahead and click OK. And the moment you do that, you will see one layer called Camera is created here. Don't worry about that at all. Just set a lock to it so that it doesn't move around, and forget about the fact that you ever added a camera. Right? That's all. That's the work of the camera, and we don't have to think about that anymore. Now you see the distortion is highly reduced. We don't have that ugly distortion that we were having before. But it still needs some tweaking, because you see this black card is almost touching the edge here. And we will fix that by scaling it. Let's go ahead and do that. We will scale all this card, so I'll select all of them. And now I want to activate the scale feature of all of them. To do that, I will press and hold Shift and hit S on my keyboard, so that scale gets revealed, and also it retains all the other keyframes that I have added already. So I will click on this stopwatch to add a scale keyframe to all these layers which I have selected. Move my handle to the final position, add scale keyframes for the final positions as well. And in the final position, I will change the values of these by a certain degree. For example, for the black one, I will change the scale to 96%. For the orange one, which is right after that, I will make it 95%. The blue one, which is the third one, I will make it 94%. And the final one, which is a silver, I will make it 93%. Yep. By doing it, they are pretty much contained within the limits of my mobile frame. But I'll also want to make a few more changes here. And the changes, I want them to spread out or to change their position in the final stage. To do that, I'll again add a position keyframe. I'll go back again to the initial stage, select all of them, press and hold Shift and hit P on the keyboard to reveal position and also keep showing all the things that we've already added. We'll go ahead and click on this stopwatch to add a keyframe to all of them, all the selected layers. We'll move the handle to the final position and add a position keyframe there as well. Now while in the final position, we'll select all of them and bring them down somewhere in the center, the entire group. Now the entire group is somewhere in the center, but we want them to be spaced out. So what will I do is I will leave the black one wherever it is. So I will deselect black and have only orange, blue and silver one selected, and I will take them a little up so that it is a little more visible. Now the orange one looks fine, so I will deselect orange and do the same thing to the blue and silver. So you see, I'm creating space between them. Now I'll deselect blue and move the silver one a little up. So this way I have created enough space between them, right? So when I again come back, you see it's moving down and also spreading. So it's creating that fanning effect. It's becoming more and more prominent as we are making those changes. Now along with that, I also want them to rotate at slightly different degrees. I know that initially when I was making them, I had set a rotation angle of 50 degrees for all of them, but now I'll go ahead and change them. For black in the final stage, while my handle is in the final stage, let black remain 50 the way we had put them. For the orange one, I will make it 45. For the blue one, I'll make it around 35 maybe. And for the silver one, I'll make it, let's try 25. Yep. You see what has happened? So all of them are rotating at different angles now, and they're rotating at different degrees because Think of how a fan works when you just open it, a hand fan or something like that. And now that I've made these changes, there's a need to move all of them together because I want the entire group to be somewhere in the center of the screen. So I will select all of them once again, whether you select everything here or you select the layers in the timeline, it's all the same. So once they're selected, while my handle is in the final position, I will pull them down, somewhere so that they're roughly at the center of the screen. Yep, that looks good. Let's go ahead and see a preview once. Please note that while you are previewing files which has 3D layers, the rendering time may be a little more because the computer is actually processing more things than before, since there are 3D elements which are available in your layers right now. Yeah, I think this looks pretty fine. It just needs one more thing, which is nothing but shadow. Now shadow is going to change a lot of things. It's going to make it much more realistic. And to do that, what I'm going to do is I'll have to activate shadow for all of them. And to do that, I will select all these layers, black, orange, all the way up to silver. Go to Effect, Perspective, and Drop Shadow. The moment you do that, you will see a drop shadow element appearing in the Effect and Controls tab. Now this tab coexists in the same window with Project. The same place, where you have your files and composition. In the same window, you'll find another tab which says Effect Controls. This Effect Control tab was actually always present, but since there was nothing inside, we never bothered to. Now that we have certain effects applied to these layers, that effect starts appearing here. Now we need to go and change the effects. Now one thing is, you cannot select all of them and change these effects because After Effects doesn't work that way apparently. So you'll have to do it individually. So what I'm going to do is just change the values for all of them. So I will select black and set the direction to 0 because that's how I want it. I want the shadows to be firing upward and not at an angle. The distance will be 20 and the softness, I want it really soft, around 300. You see, this black is now actually it has that shadow that we want. Similarly, we'll do it for orange as well. Yep, now you see we have added shadows to all the 4 layers. Now if I set the quality to full, you see how beautiful it looks, how realistic it looks. They look like real cards with just the right kind of shadow. Skeuomorphism at its best, right? Alright, I'll move back to quarter because full is going to be heavy on my system, especially with this 3D layers. Now, after adding the shadows, it looks perfect in the final state, but when you move the handle to the initial stage, you'll find everything is very dark. The reason being, all the shadows of the 4 cards, since they're stacked one above another, are getting added up and it makes it look very dark. So what we need to do is, we will animate the shadow so that it's lighter towards the initial, in the initial stage, and it's darker and softer, just like the way we want in the final stage. Because shadow is one of the properties that you can animate. So what will I do is I'll pull the handle and take it all the way to the initial one. Now even this needs to be done individually for each one of them and you cannot do it in bulk by selecting all of them together. Unfortunately, that's how After Effects works. So let's do that one at a time. I will increase the size of the timeline. First, let me go to the black one. And while my handle is in the initial, in the position of the initial set of keyframes, I'll go ahead and animate or add keyframes for opacity, distance, and softness of this drop shadow. Now you might be thinking that you have just turned on this stopwatches here in the effects control panel. How is it going to change things in my layers here? Well, it actually does, because if you see, the moment you do that, we have those extra keyframes added here to drop shadow as well. So if I just click on this, you would see opacity, distance, and softness. It got added here. And if we just go ahead and hit U on the keyboard, what it does is it just shows me the keyframes which I have added. So for black, I have added this 3 extra keyframes and you see these 3 started appearing. I haven't added these keyframes to orange, blue, and silver yet, so they don't have them. So let's do one at a time. So for black, I added them here. I go to the final stage, add the shadow keyframes to the final stage as well. Come back to the initial stage, and here I'm going to change a few things. For the initial stage, I want the opacity of the shadow to be 20%. the distance to be 8, and the softness to be 60. See, I've considerably reduced the shadow values in the initial stage. Similarly, I will do the same exercise for orange, blue and silver as well. Let's quickly do it. Great, I've done it for all the 4 cards. Now you see, while my handle is at the initial stage, the cards looks much cleaner. That ugly dark shadow that we were seeing is not there anymore because it's just seamlessly animating from the initial to the final stage. And you see that deep shadow and deep and soft shadow only when it is in the final stage. And when it's in the initial stage, we reduce the values, and that I've done for all the 4 cards. Now we are actually done with the cards animation. It's pretty simple. All that I need to do is just ease these keyframes. So I will press while my mouse pointer is pointed towards the timeline. I will go ahead and hit tilde on my keyboard so that the timeline expands and shows me in full screen. I'll hit U once again to ensure all the keyframes that I have added are in vision. I will select the initial set of keyframes, hit tilde once again, and ease them. And to do that, I will be using my Motion 2 plugin. I will go ahead and give it an initial value of 40, which is the outgoing velocity influence. If you don't have this plugin, you can always right click on any of these keyframes, go to keyframe velocity and set the same value here. You see, I have set 40 here in the outgoing velocity influence. The same 40 appears here. So you can always go ahead and change it to 40 or 50 or any number you want. So for this, I'll be using 40. So this keyframe velocity panel is inherently present in After Effects. This Motion 2 is a plugin. It's a third-party plugin. It's a paid plugin. But if you use After Effects on a daily basis, if you use it quite often, then it's a good investment that you can make to get it done. So I've added an influence of 40% to all the outgoing velocities, which are this. Similarly, for the ending keyframes, I'll select all of them and add an incoming velocity of an influence of 80% to the incoming velocity, and I can do it by simply using the slider. Of course, alternately, you can always, go to the velocity panel, keyframe velocity, and you see this is the incoming velocity. Influence is 80%, which is nothing but this slider out here. Okay, I'll go ahead and click OK. Now we have eased as well, so let's go ahead and play and see how it looks. It's slow because it's rendering. Like I said, it's a little intense on your system because it's 3D. Okay, it's rendered. So, yep, it looks pretty good, pretty nice and smooth. Now we'll go ahead and quickly do the next steps. So, I started at 0, 40 frames after 0. We started the animation here, which was spread across another 40 frames. Now from this, I'll move another 60 frames ahead. I'll press Command and Shift on my keyboard and press the right keyboard 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 times. And now I want to pause here. So I want nothing to happen between this duration, and hence I will go and add the same keyframes all over once again. To do that, I will, just to see it better, I'll go ahead and press tilde while my mouse is pointing on the timeline so that it expands and I see everything. I will hit these. I'll click and drag them here so that it adds all the keyframes in a row right where my handle is present. Once I'm done, I'll hit tilde and go back here. I'll go ahead 40 frames once again, Command Shift and the right keyboard 1, 2, 3 and 4 times. So when I'm here, in this stage, I want this blue card to go and sit at the top, and the remaining cards to go out of the frame at the bottom. Let's do one thing at a time. Let's do it for the blue card first. This is my blue card. Let me just take it up. I don't want it in a rotated state like this, so I will go ahead and make the X rotation, which was set to +35, to 0. Yep, and now that I have reduced it, I can actually adjust the position of exactly where I want it. Yeah, I think this is good enough. Similarly, while this happens, I want the silver, orange and the black cards to disappear. To do that, I will select the black, orange and the silver card and I will bring them down. while my handle is still at the final position. Now I'll do some adjustments here. I don't want them to be rotated while it's disappearing. So I will set the angles of all of them to 0. Like for the orange, it was set to 45. I'll make it 0. For the silver, it was 25. I'll make it 0 again. For the black, it was 50 and I'll make it 0 again. And I'll also ensure that their spacings between them are roughly the same. So I will bring the silver card a little down. Yep. Now that I've ensured all of them are equally spaced and at a 0 angle, I will select all of them and bring them out of the frame at the bottom. Now you see what is happening in this? In this stage, the blue card is going up and every other card is going to the bottom. Now here, if you have seen it closely, you will observe a glitch, which is this. You see half of the silver card and half of the blue card. That's because, they are at an angle in the z-axis in such a way, they're kind of overlapping on each other. To see exactly what is happening, you can once again go to the left view and see. You see, this is what is happening and hence you are seeing it that way. But again, you don't have to worry. I go back to my active camera. You don't have to worry because it's going to self-heal in a way, or rather it's going to get covered by another element that we are going to place. And that element is nothing but in the final state, we have a card here, right? But before we bring that, let us make this disappear first. Let's take it all the way back to this place. This is where the stack of the cards were pulled. And while the stack of the cards were pulled, I want these graphs to disappear. To do that, it's again very simple. We go to the layer home content. I'll collapse so that you get to see what is happening. This is the home content. I have locked it. I will unlock it right now and I will set a position keyframe. To do that, I will hit P on my keyboard. It reveals the position. I'll click on this stopwatch to add a keyframe. I will also add a keyframe for opacity. And to do that, the shortcut is T, but in order to ensure that the position also shows up along with opacity, I'll press Shift and T so that the position remains and the opacity also gets revealed. I'll click on this to add an opacity keyframe. I'll move 40 frames ahead, the same duration or the same number of frames that I have set for this. And if I press U on the keyboard, you will see it's again on the same place. But I just want this thing to be shown right now because I'm working here. I will add 2 more keyframes. And in this final position, I want these graphs to come down, along the same place, the way it was arranged at the top, the spacing between the last card and this here. And while it is in this position, I will make the opacity 0. So it disappears. And I'll also add the same amount of easing. For the initial ones, I will add 40. For the final ones, I'll add 80. Now if I go back and just play it once again, you see the cards are fanning out and along with that, those graphs have also disappeared. Now we don't have to worry about the graphs at all because once we make them disappear, it stays like that. So I'll go ahead and press U on my keyboard to reveal all the keyframes. So here it is. So fans out, one card is selected, a pause, and then it expands that selected card. Now when the card is selected, along with this, the cards getting disappeared, there are 2 other things which are happening. A purple background appears to the top section and the details or the transaction list of this card appears from the bottom. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's first add the transaction list. To do that, I'll go to my project panel once again, image assets, and here details contents is the name of the image that I had made. I will drag and drop and place it right under blue. Okay, I didn't place it under blue. I will just place it here. This is my blue card and this is my details content. And I'm here in the final stage, so I will align how this is going to look. So if you remember in the design, I'll set it to full so that you see in full quality what is happening here. Yep. So I will bring it somewhere here so that these tabs are, right under the card, maybe a little up. You see, this is where my white card is ending. It is overlapping with my blue card, and this is my bottom sheet with all the transactions. So this is my final stage. In the initial stage, which is this, I don't want this to show up. I want it to disappear. I'll switch back to quarter so that it's a little more comfortable. Yep. So in the initial stage, this layer of details content needs to disappear. So we'll add an opacity keyframe, and the shortcut to do that is to hit T on the keyboard. It reveals opacity. I add a keyframe by clicking on the stopwatch. Go to the final stage, add one more keyframe, and in the initial stage, I move the handle back to initial stage. I want the opacity to be 0. And I also want it to look like it's appearing from the bottom, right? So, before I make the opacity 0 so that I see how much I bring it down, I will also add a position keyframe. And to add a position keyframe to that, I will press and hold Shift and hit P on my keyboard, which reveals position. I click on the stopwatch to add a position keyframe. Go to the final stage, add another position keyframe, come back to the initial stage. Now I'll first change the position. You see, I'm moving it. And I want it roughly along the same place where my blue card is ending. So assuming my blue card is ending here, I will roughly keep it, the edge along the same place. And I will now change the opacity of the initial stage to 0. Now you see that has disappeared as well in the initial stage. We'll quickly go ahead and add the same easing which we have been adding for all our keyframes in this composition, which is 40 for the initial ones and 80 for the final ones. Now if you go ahead and play, yep, it's fine, but I think in the initial stage this details content can go a little more up. It looks like it is coming from a little more down, and I want it to look a little seamless, so I will just push it a little up. Let's see how it looks now. I think this looks fine. This looks fine. Now we need to add the purple background which was there, and for that we have an image already, which is nothing but the details background, which is purple, which is completely purple by the way. So I will place it, I'll hit U so that I collapse all the keyframes. I will bring this details background and put it right above the home background. The home background is nothing but that, that subtle white gradient that I had for the home screen, and this home content and everything is here. So I need to put this details background, which is purple color, anywhere under details content, because the content is going to cover the blue and create this window. Otherwise, if you put this above details content, you will see the entire thing blue, and that's not what we want. So any place right under details content is good enough. And we'll press U once again to reveal the keyframes. And this is my details background, the purple one which we just added. For this, we just need to do a simple opacity animation. To do that, the shortcut is T on the keyboard. I click on the stopwatch to create a keyframe, go to the initial stage, create one more keyframe, and the initial stage I want the opacity to be 0. That's it. I'll add the same easing values. 40 influence for the initial, 80 influence for the final. That looks good. Let's play the whole thing once again. That looks brilliant. Now there are just two more things which are remaining, very small ones. The entire animation is almost done, which is nothing but this header. So in the final stage, I don't want this all cards to be shown. So I'm going to just find that layer, which is all cards. I had locked it, so I'll unlock it, and I want it to disappear while it's at the final stage. And to do that is again opacity. I'll hit T on the keyboard, add an opacity keyframe, go to the initial stage, add one more keyframe, and in the final stage, I'm going to make it 0. And I'll add the same easings that I have been adding, 40 for initial and 80 for final. And now the last thing is remaining, which is nothing but this back button. Let me go to this final stage. If you remember, for the final stage, that is in this purple stage, I have a white arrow which is pointing downward. To simulate that effect as if this black is rotating and also changing in color, what we are going to do is we are going to use two arrows, one black and one white. The black one is already here. I will just bring the white arrow. Make sure that they are right on top of each other. Now they're exactly overlapping. I will set the quality to full so that you see how they're overlapping. Yes, they're right on top of each other. So here we are going to animate two things for both of these. I'll select both of them. First, add a rotation keyframe. To do that, I will hit R on my keyboard and click on this stopwatch to add a rotation keyframe. And then next, I will also add an opacity keyframe. And to do that, and to also not hide the rotation keyframes which we have just added, I'll press and hold Shift and then click on T on my keyboard. It will reveal opacity. I will click on the stopwatch to add an opacity keyframe as well. So now the black arrow and the white arrow, the back buttons, sorry, have a rotation and opacity keyframe in the final. I'll move the handle to the initial one and add these keyframes to the initial positions as well. I will set the quality back to quarter so that my computer performs a little better. Now in the final stage, I want the rotation values of both of them to be -90, which is nothing but pointing downward. You see, I selected both of them and I edited the value in any one of them. It updates it to both of them, which is -90. So they have rotated. Now we also need to change the opacity values. While at the final position, I want the black arrow to have an opacity of 0. In the initial position, I want the white arrow to have an opacity of 0. That's it. Now I'll just go ahead and ease them. 40 for the initial and 80 for the final. And we are done with the animation. But there are a few things, one or two very simple things that we can do to spice up this entire animation a little more. So let's try that. I'll hit U so that everything is collapsed. Now I want only my cards to show up the keyframes. So for that I will select black, orange, blue and the silver card. And then I will hit U on the keyboard so that it reveals only the keyframes of the selected layers. Now what is right now happening is all these cards are appearing or fanning out at the same moment. But I want them to happen one after another. I want the black card to fan out first, then the orange, then the blue, and then finally the silver. But just by a tad bit of difference. So for that I will select all these keyframes except the black one, because the black one I want them to appear first. And I will move all the selected keyframes right by 4 frames, and to do that I press and hold Option and hit the right keyboard 4 times. Now we are done moving it. I will deselect orange and do the same thing once again for blue and silver by another 4. Press and hold Option and the right keyboard by 4 times. Now I'll deselect blue and only move the silver one by 4 frames. Press and hold Option and press the right button 4 times. Now if you go and see what changes it has introduced, now this is what it has done. You see, that small delay or the offset that we have added between the cards had made it look more elastic and smooth. Yeah, looks good, isn't it? And in this, I can do one more tweak as well. So just for the blue card, that is the phase when it goes maximum, the stage where it goes to the detail page of the blue card, I can just select the blue card and the detail content as well. I can select the keyframes of this and delay it by 4 frames. To do that, I will hold Option on the keyboard and press the right keyboard button 4 times. So now what will happen is, the other cards will move a little before the blue card. So it creates an illusion, something like, the blue card is coming out and then, it's going and sitting, instead of everything happening at the same time. This is just a personal preference. I personally think maybe this will look better. If you think otherwise, feel free to go and experiment the way you want. That's it. Now this animation gets covered in roughly 3 seconds, so maybe we can add a little more buffer at around 4 seconds. I will move my handle to around 4 seconds and hit N on the keyboard to trim the composition to a length of 4 seconds instead of the 10 that we had started with. And now when you go ahead and play, that is your complete animation. That's it. We are done. Had fun or not? I'm sure you did, because today you learned to make something really cool as those card flips, the 3D ones inside After Effects, something that you always wanted to. Now using this animation, you also learned this new technique, And using this, it's not just about cards, but you can use the same technique and use your creativity to come up with many different new effects, which you may not even imagine at this point of time. So keep exploring and keep waiting for the next one. If you like this video, like, share, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell icon so that you get notified every time I upload a new video. If you have any queries, let me know in the comment section so that I can get back to you there. And if you post this animation anywhere in social media, don't forget to tag me. The handles are right there in the description. This is Sapta. See you guys in the next one.